a hearing, and I'm gonna reopen that hearing and let them continue with their presentation. We thank you. We did get the packets that you guys put together, and I think it answers some of the questions we had last month. So you can we'll go right ahead.
Great, thank you. Travis Mitchell with Environmental Design Partnership, representing Nexamp, Liza Sheps with Nexamp here, and Donna Hearn with Couch White, attorney for Nexamp. We were here last year in August, and we presented some of this information to the board. We heard, took your feedback, and it was clear you wanted some additional information on the project. So we spent the last month or so preparing the detailed plans and responding. You recall this is also in front of the planning board for site plan review, and Barton Judas is reviewing the plans for the planning board, and they had issued a comment letter, and so we responded point by point to that. We also had a meeting with the planning board chair, the zoning board chair, and the attorneys, just to talk about the process, because there's a little bit of chicken and egg between the two boards, and having to do seeker at the planning board, but they can't act on the site plan until this board acts on the variance, so it's a little complicated in terms of the necessary back and forth. But the layout is just easier to show it in this colored view than the black and whites that you have, but the layout hasn't changed. The 19 or 20 page plan set that you have just provides the additional level of detail for construction level details, erosion, sediment control, stormwater, how it will actually be constructed. You remember this is a 3 megawatt array, about 16 acres of area within the fence. This is Lakeport Road here, Smith Ridge Road here. Coming into the site, single point of access there, starts off as a 20-foot wide gravel access road and reduces down to 16 and then 12 feet as we get toward the end of the access point. We're quite a ways off the road, 500 feet off of Lakeport, 400 and some off the north line, and 350 off the east line. There's central electrical equipment located here. Those are the green boxes, and then the array, obviously, in blue. Let's see. So we had provided a detailed plan, detailed comment letter. Your board had specifically asked for a decommissioning plan, which we put together a draft of. We've already gotten some feedback on that and are working on some additional detail as far as the cost estimate goes in the decommissioning plan. So those decommissioning plans generally, to start with, reference NYSERDA guidance on decommissioning values, which is our starting point, which is what we did. The planning board had asked for some additional supporting information on those numbers, so we're in the process of putting that together. You had also asked for an operation and maintenance plan, which we put together. Kind of related to that, the planning board has asked for, just at their last meeting last week, has asked for information on, there's a screening buffer, not shown here, but shown in the plan sets, a vegetative screening buffer, asked for some type of maintenance plan on how that will be maintained, and if trees die in there, how will we replace them. So we're in the process of putting that together also. You had asked where the panels would be made. At this point, we of course know all the supply chain issues that are out there, but there is a manufacturer that Nexamp uses in Minnesota, and that's the information we use, panels that are manufactured in Minnesota. So I'm going to take you through some of the details that are in your packet that we talked to the planning board about, some of the feedback that we got at the joint meeting we had a few weeks ago now. To start off with the visual impacts, and we'll get into what's really the focus of the discussion with this board, which is the potential wetland impacts. So this should all be in the information you have, but I'll just take you through it. So I've rotated the view sideways here. This is Lakeport Road, between Smith Ridge here. There's a few different what we call receptor points, it's kind of critical points to look at this from. asked to take a look in the mobile home park. That's the closest proximity of any houses there. It's, I mentioned in that other slide, it's about 350 feet away. But we did take a look in there. So this is a view looking toward the south, and if you could see through the trees, and it's a little bit down over the hill, this is the extent of where the panels would be. Obviously, this is a vegetative state, but we'll have plenty of opportunity coming up here to snap a picture or two with the leaves off. The vegetation is dense enough in there. I'm confident that we won't be able to see it through that vegetation. And just a view from the other direction now. So solar panels, obviously, we took a picture looking back this way, just so you could tell what that looked like now. And that's from this point right here, looking back toward the mobile home park. Again, confident that the density of that vegetation is such that we won't witness it through.
The green space that I see between the solar panels and the vegetation there, roughly how far is that?
So from about here to here is 350. I think this was about 250 is what I recall of vegetation. So the greens are roughly 100 or so, maybe 120, but that's roughly that.
Okay. And that's just grass?
Yeah, I'll show you. Actually, that was another question that came up. What does that actually look like now? So one of these slides coming up, I've got a picture of that, of what that looks like. It's wildflowers. It's tall grass.
Okay.
Yep. So the other point that we took a look at is, one of the other points was here across from Smith Ridge Road. This is what that looks like right now at that intersection. So you had asked, roughly here is where that picture was taken from, looking that way, the picture I had on the previous slide. This is the area, what it looks like between here and Solar Farm. I don't think it's quite that far probably in there, but this is an older picture. I've got a little current one for you coming up as well. This is current view, and then if we superimpose the solar array, remember it's roughly 500 feet back from there. That's what that visual simulation looks like. This is what we've suggested for plantings. This is what we look like on day one. Mix of deciduous and evergreen plantings in there. We did, I can't recall if it was this board that suggested it or not, but we typically do. We went to the Army Corps because this is wetland area, to talk to them about plantings, and also the local soil and water district, just to give some feedback on plantings in there as well. This is what it might look like after 5 years down the road. You can see they've grown up tall enough that you no longer can see the array. So we take a look, and I'm just going to step down to this point, which is right at the site entrance, what it looks like right now, and what it looks like on day one of the array installation, gravel road in, telephone poles, array, that vegetative screening, and then once it's grown up, 5 years or so after installation. And the other one you took a look at is just a little bit south, and as soon as you do get a little bit south, just the nature of the topography and this hedgerow in there, it really becomes, you can't see it from down here. That is where it would be. That's the extent of where the array would be if you could see through it. So obviously the main focus of our attention with this board is on the wetlands. And I think last time we gave you a little bit of a history here. So we started this project in early 2021. Taking a look at mapped Army Corps and DEC wetlands, and this is what the mapped wetlands look like. There's a drainage channel here. Otherwise, wetlands are down in this area.
The wetlands are the green.
Yep, wetlands are the green. Yep.
Is that the turf farms?
Yes.
Getting down on all the
There is
right at
a
the
further
brown,
south.
right at the bottom where the brown is. That's probably the turf farm.
Yeah.
That's probably still a unreclaimed muck.
Okay.
So this is what we thought we were looking at for wetlands. Obviously, as part of the process, we go out there and do our own wetland delineation. And we had done our array layout based on that delineation. We do our own wetland delineation, and the darker area is what you saw last time, this darker purplish color. And although it's not mapped, it is considered Army Corps wetland based on their wetland delineation criteria. One of the points that we had talked about last time, the suggestion was, why don't we hadn't shown this purple area, why don't you just move the array here and get it further away from the wetland? we hadn't delineated that area because it wasn't part of the lease area. It wasn't an area we had focused on. But after the discussion with the board, we did go out and continue our wetland delineation so that we knew basically what it looked like across the entire property. And so, other than the areas where there's some active farming going on, it's classified as an Army Corps wetland, meeting that criteria. And I think if this wasn't farmed, it would probably eventually progress into also emerging wetland.
So then you're supposed to stay 1,000 feet from the, even the purple then?
Everything. So the way the code reads is 1,000 feet from any wetland. It doesn't matter if it's your state, Army Corps, any wetland. So this is just going back to what does that look like now? This is what that looks like now. This is that picture that I had toward the mobile home park will be over here. The other thing we took a look at was farmland. Now, Soil Conservation Survey has this mapped a good chunk of this as prime farmland. I think Steve, you made the comment that it's not prime farmland, and I think any farmers could agree with you. And this mapping, like the Army Corps mapping, it's done 50,000-foot view. It's based on soil grouping, but I think it's this is listed as prime if drained, and that's probably at best what that area is. So there's just the same image that you saw before with the array layout. There is no place to move this where we wouldn't impact wetlands, and it becomes a challenge for the solar projects. I showed you this graphic last time. These are all mapped wetlands north of Chittenango in the town, and if we applied the 1,000-foot buffer, there is no location for solar. And again, it becomes a challenge, where to place it. You don't want to clear vegetation. You don't want it on prime farmland. Really, a situation like this where it's on and off, farmed, not farmed, kind of marginal for being able to do any farming is, in our opinion, a good location for this. As far as the process goes, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but we're in front of the planning board for site plan approval, special use permit. We've been there 4 times now. They did initiate coordinated review under seeker, and they will be the lead agency. What that means is they need to take action on seeker before you can take action on the zoning variance request, but they, being the planning board, can't act on the site plan until you act on the zoning variance request. So we're back and forth, each month with both boards to push it forward. We did receive TDE comments back in July, responded to those with detailed plans, and then after our planning board meeting last week and also the joint meeting between the planning and zoning board chairs, we did receive some additional feedback on information that we're putting together. I touched on most of it for the planning board to be in a position that they could take up seeker. So that's submittal for that board is next Tuesday, which is our goal to submit that for them for Tuesday, so that again they'd be in a position to be able to take up seeker. So that's all I have formally prepared. We can certainly take any questions, comments.
Do you have any other examples of building these on Army Corps wetlands?
So that's a really good question, and that's something that the planning board has asked for, and I didn't touch on that yet. They had asked for a very detailed, the planning board and the Barton and Legit has asked for a very detailed kind of construction sequencing. How do you get this done in wetlands? And so we're working on putting that together for them for Tuesday, along with examples and photographs of other installations.
But now none of this is actually on the wetland.
It is on the wetland, yeah, so let me jump back.
Okay.
So it's tough to see blue on blue.
Right.
I think it probably shows a little bit better in your black and white, but there is under portions of this, not everything. You can see through here where it isn't, but there are portions of this that are on the wetland. And so just as a reminder in terms of where, so this is Army Corps wetland. And so the Army Corps position on solar in particular in wetland, unlike many other forms of development, do not consider the solar panels, the posts, the fencing disturbance. As long as they're driven into the ground, they don't consider it disturbance. So as far as the Army Corps is concerned, the disturbance is the roadway, right, the gravel roadway, and the concrete pads that would house the equipment. So there's certain thresholds to stay under nationwide permitting of the Army Corps, which the first level threshold is 1/10 of an acre of disturbance. And so that's what we will seek with this project with the Army Corps, is a nationwide permit for a 1/10 acre of disturbance.
Over on BB Bridge Road and Canal, was that wetlands that you built those projects on?
I can double check on that specific project, but I don't think so, but
Really?
wetlands with solar is pretty common. We have our own construction group and we have done this on other projects. Just to add to the history of this project, we touched on this last time, but the access road in our first preliminary designs was actually along this side of the property. And once we did the wetland delineation, we flipped the site over so that to minimize the disturbance to be under that 1/10 of an acre. And we did provide Barton and Judas with this memo that will be dispersed, but that outlined the Army Corps' stance on solar in the wetlands. And under a 1/10 of an acre of disturbance, you actually don't need a permit, but we always get a permit regardless. You actually have up to a 1/2 of an acre. This project is under a 1/10 of an acre of permanent disturbance, and it's where Travis pointed out at the access road entry, the equipment pads, all of that have been placed off of the Army Corps wetland limits, so as not to have disturbance there. But there is the disturbance at the access road entry. And then the pieces of the project that are on the Army Corps wetlands over here, you see the solar panels and the racking and then the fencing.
How far from Canishraga Creek are you going to be?
So this is roughly 350 feet from the edge of the fence to that rear property line, which is on the creek.
Thank you.
Do all the railroad ties that are in storage over Bridgeport have anything to do with this project?
The railroad ties?
Yeah. There's literally a mountain of railroad ties
They've been
that are
working,
in storage.
they've been
For the
working,
power lines.
yeah, they've been working on the high lines, say they started, cause on some of our property, they've been using those
Okay.
ties so they can get down and maintain their property.
Okay,
And not
without burying their
That's
equipment.
what it-
I was just
Well,
curious.
no, it goes back to what they're required to do too, they're not supposed to disturb the ground.
Okay,
And so that's probably what you're alluding to, is the use of timber mats or lead mats,
Yep.
for crossing soft areas, which is one of the construction techniques in weather slopes.
Before you got here, Mike, they talked a little bit about the decommissioning, and I don't know if you looked through your package, they had some numbers and all that.
there was like $105,000 allocated.
Cause it was what, the example you had was a 2 megawatt, and I think it was what, like, was it 90,000?
Yeah, Travis touched on this. What he was saying was that he started off with the NYSERDA standard. And then we discussed this with John Langy, Rebecca from BNL, Planning Board Chair, and Steve. And we got some feedback on this, and part of our upcoming updated submission is site-specific numbers, but it's typical that we start off with the NYSERDA standard guidance.
I'm gonna step back for a second, because we have a few new faces. I think last time we met, there was only one person here, maybe, or maybe I'm wrong, maybe my memory's wrong. But anyways, if there's anybody here at the hearing tonight that has a question, you know, feel free to ask. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not gonna be able to make a decision until the circa is complete, you know, so this is just giving them an opportunity to tell us where they're at and maybe address any concerns that this board has. So if there's anybody here that has a question, you got an opportunity, or I'll give you another opportunity later on. Okay, Art.
Thank you. The company wants approval to plot a 16-acre footprint directly under the federal wetland. The only federal wetland on its 273-acre site. I see in the purple and blue that occupies roughly half the site. There's some green there available. It's possible this is the wrong site for this project, but the sensitive wetland supposedly occupied less than 10 acres of the 273. It appears to have grown. My further comments are the 1/10 of the wetland acre disturbance is somewhat misleading in that it reflects only the impact of the access road and the major equipment, as the company just mentioned. The proposal does not divulge the wetland acreage impact of the rest of the 16-acre footprint. Nor do they mention what is the percentage of the wetland to be covered by their 16-acre footprint. And that's rather important as I go along with my further points here. But please ask the applicant to provide these wetland impact calculations before closing the public hearing and issuing your decision. Number two, the applicant is asking the board to approve the proposal to avoid the town's 1,000-foot setback requirement for wetlands, and then prepare to present a presentation map showing the impact of the 1,000-foot setback. But they failed to prepare for you any maps to show other potential compromise setbacks, which good management would expect, good planning would expect them to do, which is what does that map look like with compromise setbacks of 900 feet, 800 feet, 700, 600, 500. I'm surprised that the good minds at the Nexant didn't do that, but in any event, I think you should ask for that. The preparation of these alternative maps would be good planning and useful in helping the board to consider other various compromise setback positions for the project footprint. And the board should request these maps to be prepared by the applicant before closing the public hearing and issuing a decision. Number three, the applicant still hasn't presented any biological studies to determine what species of flora and fauna exist in the wetland. Wetland is composed only of flora and fauna, and they're talking about taking 16 acres of flora completely down to put this in. So the fauna dependent on those 16 acres are gone. You're giving up that part of the wetland. What do you want to say to those particular items that depend on the flora? It's quite amazing to place this project within a wetland area. The applicant should have studied the wetland and present to the board a list of some of the species that are in there. Instead, we get a picture of plants that are characterized as a bunch of weeds that are probably coming down. Further, wetlands are environmentally sensitive sites. Sunlight is vitally important to the flora and possibly to the fauna living there too. Now imagine the life and health impacts of blocking their access, let alone mowing them down. Please imagine the board gave approval for a developer to build a multi-story building close to the south side of your house, blocking most of the sunlight. Wouldn't your health suffer? Well, mowing down the flora, just like the dinosaurs, they couldn't survive without the flora. And in this case, the impact is going to be significant on the flora within that 16-acre area. Number four, last, maintenance. The proposed maintenance activities will most certainly impact severely, starting with a total degradation of that 16-acre footprint. Out it comes, all the flora. It'll impact severely the most basic building blocks of a wetland ecology. However, without biological studies, we also don't have any real assurance that they won't use herbicides as part of the maintenance. They provided no written company policies regarding herbicides, growth regulators, or anything else within their solar project's footprint. Mowing deters the flora. It eliminates the flora. The fauna that depends on it is going to be gone from that part of the wetland. And we still don't know what size of wetland is going to be impacted here. All we've got is a 16 acre, and it looks like it occupies fully a wetland. So we've got some good reason for setback requirements, maybe an alternative to the setback requirements, but you don't even have some alternative maps from this applicant to be able to explore the possible alternative setbacks. Please ask the applicant to provide their company's written policies regarding ongoing periodic maintenance of the flora, as well as what they're planning for alternative setback requirements. And I think that map will be very interesting to the board. Thank you. Art Lilly.
Thank you, Art. I don't want to sound like I'm taking the side of the company, but I mean, a farmer could go there and plow it all up and plant corn, and none of the floor or anything would be there. I mean, that is ground that is, okay by the DEC to be tilled and cropped. But you did bring up some good concerns, so thank you. Does anyone else have any concerns? You guys had any more presentation? If there's anybody here on the board that has any further questions?
Am I correct that they haven't issued their secret determination yet?
Correct. They don't have their secret, and we can't make a decision.
So I would make a motion to table. the public
Yeah,
hearing.
we will be, but I guess I'm not quite ready. I'm just,
Oh, I got it when you're ready.
Okay.
May I just respond to a couple of assertions made?
It's an open meeting, yes.
So I thought Travis made clear, but I'll just emphasize that again. So those colored areas are different wetlands, just different mapped wetlands. So there's really only these small portions that don't have any color on them that are not a wetland.
Right. You're saying that green, the dark green is a wetland and the light green is a wetland
Correct.
too. And
What,
their different delineation is because of what,
So the lighter green is the DEC wetland, the darker green is mapped Army Corps wetlands.
what is
So this is where I always get confused.
So,
And the purple is what?
well, so these are mapped wetlands, right? And so then the purple and the blue are also Army Corps wetlands. They weren't mapped, they were delineated by our office, which.
Oh, okay.
So really, all of this is this darker green, it's all Army Corps wetland.
Okay.
And then you have the DEC wetlands there.
So unlike DEC, Army Corps still has jurisdiction over wetlands, even though they're not mapped. So DEC only has jurisdictions of those that they have mapped. However, Army Corps will have jurisdiction over all of these if they fit within the certain
If they get
criteria.
determined.
Right, even though they're not mapped.
Right, so once you go out there and do a soil survey and you can come back and say, hey, this is, so when you started this project, you didn't, when you started this project, you did not think it was a wetland.
Right, the green areas were what we saw online as the mapped wetlands, so we thought we were, and this was before any wetland setback in the town local solar law. There's no wetland setback for this type of, wetland in any other local law that I understand. I think you can disrupt it with other, developments. With that said, that is the code, we're absolutely taking every step. But, so this is all Army Corps wetlands throughout this site. And that's what we were getting at with the 1,000 foot setback, where we showed the whole town of Sullivan, is that was the setback just from the online mapped Army Corps wetlands, not other types of wetlands, not wetlands that are field delineated or anything like that. So this site, where the project is located, on that mapper was one of the few little areas that were not covered in the white for the 1,000-foot setback. And so then when EDP did go out there to do the field delineated wetlands, as part of our due diligence, and part of our site design, they delineated the two areas here as Army Corps wetlands as well. So the site is covered in these Army Corps wetlands, both the green shading, the purple, and the blue. The whole site is the Army Corps wetlands. The only areas that are not are these spaces in between, and those per Ag and Markets is prime farmland. So it's a little tricky.
But where your site is, you said that was prime farmland too.
Yes. It's mapped the same area right now, and we're submitting to Ag and Markets. We're going through the full process there to make sure everything's all set with that. But the same area is right now categorized as both wetlands and prime farmland.
Well, like I said last time we met, 90% of the farmland in New York State is considered prime farmland, basically. And there's probably only 10% that's prime.
So I think to Liza's point is, as you can see on this site, I don't know, Travis, roughly half is mapped, half is in the wetlands.
That's right.
So if we were to go back and do alternative setbacks to the Army Corps mapped wetlands, it would be misleading, because just like this site, it would be like that with other sites, there could be twice as many wetlands delineated on those other parcels that just aren't mapped at this time.
The total acreage that's outlined in red there is how much?
272 or 273
Okay,
acres, so.
so you're looking at 16 acres versus 270 acres.
The,
Quick math, that's like what, less than 10% in my mind?
right, and of that, 16 acres, we can get this figure, but the coverage is not the full 16 acres.
Right, so-
Coverage of the wetlands.
I think what has to be emphasized is that the project site area is 16 acres, but the actual impact is not 16 acres because you have essentially a post that will either be driven or screwed into the ground. The only actual impacts are going to be the paths and the driveway, as Travis had mentioned. As I'm sure most of you have seen, underneath these, it's just essentially a meadow. It gets seeded and it grows and is mowed very seldomly. And as the chairman mentioned, mowing is perfectly permissible.
Well, again, I can't, going back to like our question, the site you chose, how much of that is under the purple roughly?
I'll get you the stats, but I'd say it's probably a little bit better than 50%. And the reason we showed, the impacts for the road is because that's what the Army Corps considers impacts, but we can certainly get you those stats easy enough.
And why couldn't you move it to the south a little bit where the green is? And, I'm just curious,
That's
that would
prime
be,
farmland, right?
So
because,
It's all well. If you're talking about where they're farming, it's because it's.
no, but that green, hold it, go back,
Still-
next to that green is not,
That's being farmed.
Is what on that map.
Yeah.
It's white on that map
it's
because
white
it's
on
being
that
farmed.
Right.
map, and it's the area that's currently being farmed. If it wasn't being farmed, it's our belief that it would be emergent wetland, just like the rest of the site. But
oh, you're
that's
saying since
also,
it, but that's not, that hasn't been farmed in years, has it?
it's been mowed, it sounds like, is what my wetland biologist suggested.
Mhm.
So you're saying it didn't get mapped?
It was,
We delineated it, and it is not currently wetland.
It's not currently, but you're saying if it wasn't farmed,
He believes that if it were left alone, it would
Okay.
eventually become emergent wetland.
which is what we think happened with the rest of the site,
Right,
is that it
yes.
was left alone and then became this emergent wetland, which now fits into Army Corps' classification. But the reason we can't shift it further south is, then we'd be in the prime farmland.
How close are those panels stacked to each other?
Like good question. They're roughly 20 feet in between them.
And these
So
are
this-
single axis tracker panels, which what that means is they go north-south instead, in lines north-south, instead of like what you see on the side of highways. A lot of the times they're oriented east-west, where the stationary panel facing
Facing
south. These are in lines of north to south, with the panel face that rotates throughout the day to track the sun. And that's good for a lot of reasons outside of optimizing the project, is that it also creates that movement throughout the day. Rainwater flows off in different directions, and then also the sunlight, we're able to have vegetation below.
So if they were spaced apart a little bit further, would that help to preserve the wetlands?
I think you would just elongate the project, so.
You would elongate the project site. But in spacing those panels further apart, you get more of that green area that is dependent on more sunlight contact, rather than having the panels cover more of that area.
There's a lot of different studies out there, and you can find anything you want on Google, right? But there's been a lot of information out there.
I'm just asking
Some
the
stuff you
question.
read suggests that the shading is good for the wetland, others may say that it's not. So what we've gone with is the Army Corps, the Army Corps' opinion on it, as far as disturbance or not. And I think, but to John's point, if you would extend the distance between them, if you extend it by 50%, you extend the area that you're going to cover by 50%.
Sure. But I guess my point is that it gives more of that wetland property more of an open. Still gives you the effect of having a solar panel, still gives the effect of accommodating a wetland area.
Yeah, it's something to consider. I just think it's subjective in that one person might think that's better and one person might think it's different, and we don't have any studies to base that off of.
Aren't we as a township basically mandated to have a certain amount of our energy come from solar?
No, we haven't done that yet.
They haven't done that yet? Okay. I thought that was pending or.
This
No, I might have missed it. Go back over. You cannot put solar panels on prime farmland? I thought you could.
No. So you had a few different masters here, right? So Ag and Markets, is, they would prefer not to see solar on prime farmlands.
Right.
And that's this is in an ag district, so we're working with Ag and Markets and
Okay.
notice of intent. I mean, it's allowable. They obviously don't like it.
I mean, why would we, as a community, wanna waste the prime farmland on solar panels?
I think that's the issue here, right? You don't want to take down trees. You don't want to chew up prime farmland. And so a situation like this where you've got marginal farmland with an emergent wetland that the Army Corps of Engineers does not consider it to be an impact, and we like to think these can live together, with solar panels in this area.
Do we want to touch on the seeding and everything that's proposed? It is part of the site plan, is the vegetation plan. One thing that was brought up to us at our last meeting was making sure the vegetation on the proposed landscaping plan, that the maintenance of that is included in the operations and maintenance plan that we previously submitted. So that's one edit that we're making in our upcoming submission. But then there is in our current plan set the seeding, the pollinator mix, everything like that proposed. So that has been specified.
So really, you're looking for 1,000 feet of variance, right, Mike? And actually, since it goes under the property, it would be more than that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the issue with running different alternatives. I mean, there's no alternative here that doesn't impact wetland.
Right. But like I said, before this board, you would need a variance, and theoretically, you need 1,000. And I think since it's going under the project, you need more than 1,000.
And I mean, unless I'm being naive, based on the map that you showed with all the wetlands around the greater Sullivan Township area, there's virtually no place that you could shoehorn a solar project in there.
And this is what we were getting at, is this is only the mapped wetlands, not the field delineated, so, and this is our project site, which touches on there. And there's multiple factors that go into whether or not a solar project is feasible on a certain site. Wetlands is just one of them. There's also proximity, to the
Power line.
yeah, the three-phase power substation and electrical equipment and the capacity of that. There's historical aspects,
Your
there's,
entire Divine Farm is not what that
Is that?
is. That's what it looks like. Remember Divine Farm?
I'd have to take a close,
The biggest spot south of I-90, all the way east.
probably.
That just went up in value.
We just lease it, that's why the
Just
landlord, that's why the
skyrocketing value.
landlord
That
wants.
that's the only solarable property on the entire map.
But I think,
Again, this is only
not to get
yeah,
too
this is only
sidetracked.
mapped.
No,
We
that's-
thought
Not,
we
not to
were-
get too sidetracked, again, we don't own it, but when another company was looking at solar, when they went out and did the field delineation, they found it was all wetlands and they backed out.
Right. And when we started this project, we looked into all these different due diligence items, including wetlands, which is why we settled on the northern part of the site, and we thought we were void of wetlands. This is kosher for other towns, exactly what we're doing. And we have done it on various projects. It's common for solar to be placed in Army Corps wetlands, as we're doing, as long as you follow all the Army Corps standards and compliance factors. And then also the local solar amendment didn't come into play until December 15th or 16th, 2021. And we had started this project in March of 2021.
But you
So
guys,
we're
so you
fully
guys,
underway.
you guys did the soil samples when? March of,
The initial wetland delineation?
yeah, when did you guys do the
Yeah,
delineation?
so the initial, this area in the darker blue would have been, springtime 2021.
Okay.
And then, when the
It
board,
was October.
was it?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it was sometime during this 2021.
I guess my question is, it seems like that would be one of the first steps, like the first active steps in determining whether or not to use a site.
Yeah,
So you guys started the project in March of 2021. What other things were you doing before you did the soil
So
samples
this-
to see if it was a viable site?
So the first step is to go through mapped wetlands, which we do, you do a layout.
Or is the first step to see if you can get a power connection?
Well, that's what I say. So the first step is you check out all the information that you can find online. Then you go to National Grid to understand if you've got a power connection. And there's a long delay there in waiting. And then once you realize that that's a go, then you get out there with boots on the ground and do surveys and do the map delineations.
So before we even enter a site agreement with the landowner that's interested in solar, we do a lot of due diligence, wetlands, topography, size, for the physical aspects of the site. We look into online databases for soil, historical aspects, those type things. Then we look into proximity to three-phase lines, the existing utility infrastructure, the permitting pathway. I downloaded the code last March on the town zoning bylaws, conservation and ag preservation. So we looked at all of those different things, and we were checking all those boxes.
When
At
did
which
you
point
guys become aware that there was a moratorium in place?
we didn't.
While we were,
It was almost ironic because EDP submitted a due diligence report to us on the same date as, and then I was searching on the town's website to make sure we had all the application requirements. And since I did a code word search for solar, I saw in the town meeting minutes from December 15th of 2021 that there was a solar amendment. We weren't aware that there was any moratorium. We weren't aware that there was anything until it was adopted in December. And then So yeah, that was that, but to speak to when we started actively working on the project was in March of last year. We had site control, then we submitted to the utility.
So you guys
We got
didn't
that.
reach out to the town to get any information from the town codes office until December, January?
I think typically the process is early on, in early 2021, we would gather the information, the code information that's available at the time, and then move through the due diligence that Liza suggested. And, I mean, we were not aware that it was under consideration for this.
Did I hear you correctly when you said the town of Sullivan, to your knowledge, is the only one that has 1,000-foot setback?
To my knowledge, yes, it is,
There may be
double,
others,
triple, any other town I've looked at.
It also only applies to solar.
Yeah, that's a little bit unique.
But to speak to the timeline, what we did is we were actively working on there's a lot that goes into preparing the project before we present it to the town. So we were doing the back and forth with the utility to find out if this is feasible, what project size, where the interconnection is, and everything like that, because the utility actually shifted our point of interconnection, and because of the existing utility infrastructure, we were downsized from 5 megawatts AC to 3.1 megawatts AC. So we got that first full interconnection Caesar report back on December 6th of 2021, and then we were doing back and forth. So we were still working on that, still designing the site, still doing all of that, and looking into preparing for the town. So
So it's your normal practice to not interact with the town at all until you have the designs ready to show them?
Yeah, typically, we'll gather all the available information as far as the codes go to understand the process, and then.
But without interaction?
Unless we're not able to gather the.
It seems like you guys put a lot of investment into it prior to any connection with the town to see what direction the town was leaning, what the town had. I know that you saw the code online, but.
So that
I mean,
to
it's a
us
phone call.
was our full, complete story here of this is what the law says, and at that point, we were 100% in compliance with everything.
Well, there
We
was
were
a mor-
able to do.
But the moratorium had been in place for quite a while because they were working out amendments to the law. And a phone call would have elicited that we were in the middle of a moratorium and would have signaled, you might wanna wait and see where the chips land before you put serious investment into any particular site in the town. It seems like you guys did a lot before making contact. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we had a lot of phone calls. I had a lot of phone calls from solar companies that were mainly interested north of 31 because there's a lot of vacant land up in there.
Right.
And I kept telling them on the phone,
Wait.
we have a moratorium.
Right.
Wait until it comes out.
So that phone call at that stage would have put a halt on this and would have slowed it down so that you guys wouldn't have been taking on the risk of investing so far into this project in the midst of a moratorium because it was an amendment coming.
I don't know if that would have changed anything. It was definitely a surprise to us when we did sit down to do that, because we had thought that we were doing all of that due diligence and had done all that due diligence. But I think we would have still landed in the same point. We had already months prior, in March of 2021, started and paid the first initial Caesar fee. We had done all these different items. We were still not, at that point, the 1,000-foot setback.
National Grid didn't say anything about the fact that the town of Sullivan had a moratorium at that time?
No.
I don't know how relevant that is, when it comes down.
Well, it's relevant to financial hardship, because if the financial
Okay.
hardship was because of not doing a good job on due diligence of contacting the town and finding out that there was a moratorium.
I
and
guess
anticipating
if
a change in
I'm-
the law, then that would affect whether or not the financial hardship, I think it would affect the degree to which the financial hardship argument is
This is
self-inflicted.
This is
I-
a use variance so far.
I guess I look at it a little differently. If I'm a businessman,
Self-inflicted hardship is one of the 5 standards for an area variance.
I guess I look at it a little differently. If I have a business and I want to do something and I check all the codes, I want to keep it a little close to my vest. I don't want the whole world to know what I'm doing and what's going on. And I personally think they did do their due diligence. They checked it, everything's good. and whether they missed the moratorium or not, you know, like I said, I don't know how well it's advertised in our website, and if they need, you know, I don't think they need to be checking our website every week to say, oh, is this town, or another one of these towns is putting a moratorium on it.
And at that point, we're doing our preliminary due diligence, we're submitting to the utility, we're making our assumptions, and we're finding concrete answers to them. For instance, is interconnection feasible here? And it's not just our own sleeve here, it's the landowners, and if solar can be controversial, any development on any property can be controversial, so we don't wanna go around the town and say this landowner is potentially bringing something to the town if it's not concrete yet. And we started that in March, so then in December we got our first answer from the interconnection, which is the biggest obstacle in the original development of a solar project.
Was the moratorium on solar exclusive to north of 31 or the entire town of Sullivan?
Well, the previous, solar law, I think it was only like a 200 or a 100 foot setback off the wetland. But they put the moratorium on, and then they made it even harder.
Raise that up, plus it was that when they put on, you had to
And then they
have a cash.
eliminated anything north of 31 because they wanted that all residential development out there, so.
Okay. That was my recollection, that it started out as a moratorium north of 31, near and dear to my heart, that's where I live, okay? And then I wasn't aware that it expanded to the whole town. Okay.
Again, earlier I mentioned decommissioning. I thought last time we met, Mike, that you had some concerns, or you're all right for tonight. We don't need to go down that road tonight.
Because I didn't think seeker was done, and because I knew that we want to have representation, I didn't go through the packet yet, so I'll definitely have questions about the biggest question on decommission, and I think you guys said last time, the system that you guys are using, the materials that you're using are new enough that there are not any decommissioned solar arrays that have been made of this material that have actually been put through the process of being eliminated.
Yes and no. Where these projects and the lifespan of these projects are 25 to 40 years, we don't have a lot of data in New York State. There's a lot of data in California. And what we had discussed was salvage value is baked into these decommissioning plans a lot of the time. What we're doing in this town is, we started off with the NYSERDA guidelines, which does bake in salvage value. We're doing a site-specific cost estimate that will be submitted in our upcoming submission for decommissioning. And what we're doing is we are waiving that salvage value. So we're going in with the initial cost estimate, and we're taking the responsibility for that. And if down the road we can salvage it, great. And if not, it won't be accounted for in the cost to the town for the cash surety.
But this material that you guys are using hasn't reached its life cycle yet, even in the, to my recollection, you guys represented that the materials that you're using for these panels is different than the panels that were designed 25, 40 years ago that are becoming decommissioned in California. Did I misremember or misunderstand?
I think Liza described that there's two different types of panels that are used. We're using.
Yeah, there's thin film solar panels and there's PV solar panels. For a lot of reasons, we've chosen PV as our standard panel.
PV is photovoltaic?
Yes, and there's, they've been decommissioned, but with all technology, there's iterations year after year.
Right.
So these are newer panels.
Do the projected decommissioning costs include any inflationary factor?
Yes, there's actually, for the town's local solar law, there's 150% markup.
And then there's no annual adjustment, you're just saying right at the get-go, I'm not familiar with that part of the law, so.
I don't recall off the top of my head if the town has an escalator.
There's every 5 years, the
They
amount is
Right.
reviewed. I don't know off the top of my head if there's, an annual escalator that's done, especially with a cash surety, that gets very complicated. Settling up year after year with the town, and that's a lot of responsibility for the town to take on. With the cash surety, which is the town's specified decommissioning approach.
And the decommissioning security amount will get set by the planning board during the site plan with B&Ls.
Does the board have any other questions? Does anybody here, we're not gonna close the public hearing tonight, because we can't make a decision, so whether, you know, I'm not sure if seeker's gonna be done by next month, when this will be before our board again or not, you know, but like I said, we won't be able to make a decision tonight. Do you have anything else you'd like to present?
I guess for us, we just want to know if there's any other information that the board might need to go through those factors the next time we meet. You know, is there any questions you need answered? Is there any more documentation? Anything like that that can help?
No, I think you've answered all of my questions so far. All right, Mike, it's your turn.
I'll make a motion to table the public hearing.
I'll
Second it. Yep.
All in favor of tabling the public hearing till next month, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, okay. Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, and if you do think of any additional items that you'd like, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we just got some minutes to approve. Well, we'll go to, Mike wasn't here, so what's in front of you, Mike?
I know, I heard about it.
Okay, you've heard about it, so this will probably definitely be on next month.
What I don't know is what the variants are that are needed.
Just a non-conforming lot, because they're gonna end up with a barn or a shed on a lot with nothing, but they meet all the setbacks, area things. And then Larry said, so if you follow me.
They're here tonight.
Oh, they're here?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you certainly, we're looking at your map, so.
Is it Bellerin's map, Esther Avenue?
Yes, sorry, that's what we're talking about, I didn't realize.
The
I thought you were here for the last meeting, okay.
My one concern, and it's a big concern, is we don't let people have garages and sheds like this near the lake, especially with lake frontage, because they turn into a catch-all for all their crap that they wanna have down toward the lake. And if there's not a residence there, there's no incentive for maintenance, and it becomes a blight. That would be my concern, I mean, if we were doing this the other way, if this existed and somebody wanted to put a shed on the property, we would require them to have a building permit in place to build a primary use residence or primary use structure.
Or get a special, yeah.
So first off, I mean, you're
But we wouldn't
familiar,
issue a
you're
special
familiar with
permit
the
because it's impossible
town
to
code
meet the justification.
and why, you know, you need a variance, correct?
We are,
Okay,
and I hear your concern, but my father is at the property every day, so he's there every day at the lake fishing and.
but you're selling the house and nobody, well, you're selling the house to somebody.
So this summer, my father, David Bellerin, moved in with me at my house. I don't know if you need us to come up or if you're.
Yeah, you're fine there.
Okay. He moved in with me this summer just because of age and ease of maintenance.
Right, but you don't live, you live right
I
there?
live a mile and a half from
Okay,
his
yeah.
property at 237 Esther
Yeah.
Avenue. And the reason that he's interested in the subdivision is because he didn't want to leave the lake because he's there every day
Loves it, right.
fishing. Oh, thank you. So I hear your concern about the neglect, but he's there maintaining it.
Right, he is, but at some point, it's gonna be sold to somebody else, and somebody else is gonna have the opportunity to buy a parcel right by the lake that has a garage, that has no home attached, where they're gonna be able to just bring their stuff
Park their boats there
to the
and all.
lake, and that's really a problem for
Park
every
your
other
camper on
property
it.
along the lake. Like, we absolutely do not allow people to build a garage on a vacant lot anywhere in the town, especially down by the lake, for that exact reason. That's the concern. So if this was flipped around the other way, if this was already subdivided, and he wanted to have a,
Just to
if
build
he
it.
tried to get a permit to build that garage, he wouldn't be able to get it.
We understand that, but, so this is, I think, where we just continue to face confusion, right, with the information that we're getting. We've been working on this for the past couple months, and I've been trying to support my father in gathering information to make sure
Right.
he's meeting requirements. We've met with the codes department, we went to the planning board, we spoke to the town supervisor, and the advisement that he received is to request the use variance from this board. So,
So
I guess we're,
I can speak
Now-
for myself, I can't speak for everybody else. I would be much more inclined to grant it if the garage wasn't there.
but that is the reason that he wants to keep that portion of the property. He's an avid fisherman, that garage is where he stores his equipment, and the piece of land that he's requesting to keep is for the purpose of bringing his boat dock out and storing what he has for his fishing equipment. So without that garage, it, you know, it doesn't serve the purpose of what he needs that for his fishing equipment.
I think that sort of gets to what Mike's saying. You're saying he takes the dock out in a few years when he doesn't fish, that dock's gonna be there all summer long. You know, and it just will be a collect-all place for stuff.
He'll fish his whole life.
What about after that?
We're talking
He has
about,
family
The
that would.
next person and the next.
we're talking about in 20 years when it's sold to somebody else, or 30 years when it's sold to
Our
somebody else.
family doesn't plan on getting rid of that property.
Things come up though, because we gotta look at it, things come up, you
Well,
know?
of course they do.
And, you know, it's, you know, you can't guarantee that's gonna be in your family for the next 200 years and.
No, we can't, but I don't think that we can look at a situation like that where we're saying that it's not neglected and it is maintained. I think the worst case scenario here. If the use variance seemed to be appropriate in this situation, I'm not sure, why you're suggesting that it's not.
The legal hurdles to prove the case for a use variance are very difficult to achieve. And one of the deciding factors has to be whether or not the alleged hardship is self-created. And because you're looking to divide the property, it is an inherently self-created hardship. It makes it virtually impossible for us, if not actually legally impossible for us, to approve a use variance for something like this. It would be just as difficult, and that's why we don't approve them anymore. We don't approve use variances for somebody to build a garage on a vacant lot. We just, the legal standards for it cannot be met, almost universally, unless there's a change in, unless the town causes a change in zoning that creates the hardship for the person. It's just about impossible to meet the legal standards to be able to get a use variance to have a secondary structure on a vacant lot. Whether the structure pre-exists in this case, or whether they're trying to get a building permit to put one on a vacant lot. You have to have a primary use structure, which in this case would usually be a house.
So in our neighborhood, in our area, there are at least 3 or 4 structures without homes. How were they approved?
It could have been before codes for one thing. You know, it could have been, you know.
There's a lot of that on the lake. We run into it all the time. And that doesn't make it right, but it's there, and it's just been grandfathered in over the years.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, he's not looking to build something. Everything that he wants to keep was there when he purchased the property. So he's not looking to build a garage that is not.
No, but if he was looking to build a house, it would be easy. It would be just about done. You'd be able to do it.
The other question
It's the
I
lack
have,
of it's a lack of a residence that creates the problem.
looking at this map, I see the property where his garage is. I see the house on the lake. I see a small sliver of property on the side there. But what is that And
That's
would
a
that-
right of way.
would
That-
that be-
Parcel one, parcel two. Parcel one, so that he can have access to the lake.
Right.
Parcel two, so they can sell the
This
house.
goes to this,
No, these two go together. That's why they're shaded.
that's the way it is right now,
No, right now, this is all one parcel.
Yes, he
They're
owns all
looking to
of
do a
this.
subdivision.
okay?
This is all one parcel. They wanna create two parcels from it. And the problem is that this parcel is gonna have a secondary structure. And that's what I was trying to find out, I heard about it, I was trying to find out what the need of the variance was, and nobody articulated to me. They thought it was a frontage or something. But if it's a use variance, that's really, really, really hard. But if you spent your energy, and resources to talk to a good attorney, a good property attorney, so that when you sell this home, if it's for him to have lake access, have the deed written up so that he has life use
He's
of the
not
garage.
interested in land use. And I think,
But it would accomplish this, he would be able to use the lake, use the garage.
it does,
and
but
have
it
a
doesn't
dock.
allow for him to be able to leave what he, would like to for his grandchildren, you
Right,
know?
right.
Life use doesn't extend to your whole entire
Right,
family.
so if you're looking for the longevity, then you have to put a primary structure on that parcel.
So I would just like the board to understand how silly that sounds. He owns a house that he's unable to maintain, but can still go and maintain the garage and the equipment.
Mhm.
He's moved in with his family, so he doesn't need a home, but the codes that you have are requiring that he would build a home to be able to keep his equipment that he's accumulated his life.
Is any of the family planning on moving into the house?
No, we live a mile away. My sister lives a mile from the house, I live in the opposite direction, a mile from the house, so we're always there.
Right, but you don't have any intent of getting rid of it, so you'd be maintaining the house.
Yes, and the children and the grandchildren, everybody comes
So
to
why
the house to
split
fish with Dad. Why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they all have their own homes. We don't need a house. We all have our own homes, but we enjoy getting together at the property
So you guys
to
wanna
fish
sell
with
the
Dad.
house?
Can you just
Yes.
imagine if everybody along the lake sort of did this when they sold it and they kept it? Before long, people are gonna be camping, oh, let's spend the night here and have a
You know,
cookout
we
and a
keep
beer
hearing
party.
that, but that's not our intention. And like I
That's not
said, we
right,
don't
that's not,
plan
and
on selling it.
And we believe that isn't your intention, but the thing is, you will not be owning it forever. And then,
We plan to,
right,
So why not keep the house?
because we all have our own families. We don't need the house.
well,
And selling the house and dividing the property, it's not our decision to make, it's my father's house.
mhm. But as you can sense, getting our approval from this board, I mean, you're certainly allowed to request a variance, but you've got a really uphill battle to fight. I mean, we have a precedence, it's something that we do not allow.
So I think what I'd be interested in then is looking at the surrounding neighborhood. Are there documents that we can look at to see how some of the barns on North Road, Barrett Lane have had their structures without homes? For us to kind of see how
You
we
would
can
have to
meet
do the
those
research,
needs.
I'm sure there's nothing, you know.
Are there public files though that we could look at to see how those were approved?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
okay.
if you go back 15 years or so and before,
Mhm,
this board did approve standalone structures.
mhm.
And that was before we were educated about what the legal standards are for those types of use variances. And since we were trained properly on what the legal criteria is for approving them, we haven't approved one since.
Okay, so we wouldn't expect to see one in the past few years?
No, I think the last one was probably the one on Minor Road. I don't think we've done that since then. Brant. I think that would have been the most recent. And I think before that one, we didn't do any for a little while.
I can tell you emphatically,
Since
one
you-
of our neighbors, okay, Mike Stocker, had to link his property on the lake with his barn across the road to be able to meet the justification or the legal requirement for building his barn over there, okay? That's the way that was done. The other
I'm not sure
garage,
what
You're saying the property wasn't originally part of the parcel, it was a
Correct.
separate tax parcel, and he had to put the two
he had to put
parcels
the two parcels together
before he could build the building.
before he could get a permit to build a building. And the other houses down the road at Barrett Lane, they've been there longer than I have, and I've been there for almost 20 years now, okay? So I don't know what the circumstances are for them, but they've been there for a long, long time. I know the old Blandings house, the garage across the road from them was attached and sold as part and parcel of the sale of the old Blandings residence. I mean, just going up and down the road that I live on, Sonia, okay? I know.
Tanya, I'm sorry.
I know Sonia, I don't know you, I'm sorry. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, I live across the street from Sonia, so, you know, I mean, to Mike's point, it's really an uphill battle, guys, really an uphill battle. I think you can sense from the board in our conversations tonight, you can come, you can make the appeal, but it will more than likely be turned down.
So this is, I just want to make this point again, that we've spoken to the people who know those codes and the rules and requirements, and this was the advisement that we received. So I'm not sure that you're doing a good service to the people of the town by making recommendations that are not going to be approved.
So I heard from somebody about this today, and the person I spoke with was not able to articulate to me what you were coming for the variance for. That's why the first question I asked looking at the map is, what do they need a variance for? I thought it was going to be an area variance, like a size, like the lots were gonna be too small or not enough access to a road, and that's what was communicated to me. I think it has to do with road access. Those, we have a greater degree of freedom under New York State judicial decisions about when these things get contested. But for use variances, knowing that it's for a secondary structure, no primary, we don't have that kind of latitude. We don't have that kind of freedom.
I mean, you're referring to New York State laws, but this is a town of Sullivan code.
Correct,
I mean, other
but when
counties-
things get challenged, when decisions of zoning boards are challenged, because usually it's an adversarial process. One party wants to do something with their property, a neighbor doesn't want them to be able to do it, they end up in front of, and the zoning law doesn't allow it, they come to a zoning board of appeals for relief. If relief is granted and one neighbor doesn't like it, they file a lawsuit and it gets decided in the courts, and then the courts look at the decision-making and rationale of the zoning board and determine whether or not the decision is upheld or whether the decision of the zoning board is overturned. And when they make those decisions, they write their, the judges write their rationale, and then that becomes state precedent law for how zoning boards are supposed to interpret local zoning law. And that's what we're bound to.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So what exact legal standard is it that would be met by this?
It's a use variance, and there are, I don't have
That's
the
not
sheets in front of me.
Here, I got
You're- So you're asking for a use variance, and there are, I don't remember, our legal counsel is supposed to hear this. I'm not a lawyer. There's like 3 to 5 criteria that have been established by the courts that we have to go by. One of them is proving financial hardship. A second one is showing that it is not a self-created financial hardship. And those two things, anytime you're talking about a secondary structure, are almost impossible to prove.
So now all of those items, are they, all of them have to be met, or any one of them have to be met?
There's like 4 or 5 questions, and I don't want to say it's how it comes out. This is where the board decides. You weigh them on how the answers to the questions come out. I mean, if you fail all the questions, then there's no way. If it's like 2 to 3, then the board has to make a decision.
Cannot realize a reasonable return, and it has to be shown by competent financial evidence. The alleged hardship is unique and does not apply to substantial portion of the district or the neighborhood. The requested variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. That one you'd be okay on. Well, we would argue about that actually. The alleged hardship was not self-created.
And it was.
And it has to be in your favor on all, I think it's on all 4 of those questions.
So it does?
I think so. Because
Okay.
that's why we can never,
Yeah.
why we're never able to grant.
That's why we normally have a lawyer
Yeah,
here.
and we just want to appreciate, what it is that we have to meet, what criteria, so that we're not having a bunch of legal
So
expenses.
depending on the size of the boat that he uses, didn't they put a thing in that allows a smaller shed? Or is that restricted and is not included north of 31?
It's still, it's only in the agricultural district.
It doesn't apply north of 31.
Now, I told them before that you could, under New York state law, you can do a tiny house, which a one-person house is only 300 or 196 square feet. You could actually buy a shed and convert it to a house, hook up your plumbing, hook up your sewer, and then you'd have a legal residence with the house.
I think it's actually kind of silly that the town would expect that somebody would put up a small tiny home that they don't need to be able to keep a portion of their property.
And if your concern primarily is about the unkeptness of a home, right?
Of the-
I mean, it doesn't always
of the garage.
guarantee, just because you have a small tiny home, that the area is gonna look any better than one that just has a garage. I've seen some homes with primary residences
Right.
that
That are tough.
are tough.
And there are additional codes in place, aren't there, in the town of Sullivan, where you would expect that the maintenance is not,
And if they're not maintained, I think that that'd be a code enforcement issue.
Yeah, but the thing is, we don't wanna create more work for the code officer, we're just, no, because then it's gonna get challenged, he's gonna have to take it to court, there's legal expenses, so, why open up a can of worms, I mean, I live right near one of these, I live right near where one of these buildings where nobody lives. The first person that bought the shed kept it beautiful. Everything was inside, the lawn was mowed, it was beautiful. He sold it, this next person, the weeds are growing up, there's cars, there's junk all around it.
And we appreciate that, but my point in that is that could happen potentially to a primary residence also. People's standards of how they keep
Right.
primary residences are not all consistent with
Right.
my expectations either. So I think for you to kind of presume that is unfair.
I disagree. I think it's more likely to happen if you don't live. A lot of people buy property to store their stuff on to get away from their property.
through this process, we understand that the town has had some issues with neglect and with people not maintaining their property, and we understand why there are codes in place. But if there is a codes department that's responsible for overseeing that and investigating those issues, it seems like that should be taking care of those neglect issues, and that there shouldn't be these.
Larry, when you get a call of complaint by somebody on a property, how long before it's cleaned up? When I call up and say there's junk next to my neighbor's property, how long before that gets cleaned up?
Under New York state law, I have to write them a letter and give them 30 days.
What happens after the 30 days?
And if they don't do anything,
If they don't do anything, then I take them to court, which is another 30 days. And then if they don't show up for court, then it's a 6-month delay. And then if they don't show up for court, it's another 6-month delay. And then it continues on and on and on like that. Eventually what happens is there's a search warrant sent by the judge to find the person. He's brought into court. I have to disrupt my day and go to court because he's been brought in by the sheriff's department. He agrees to clean it up. The judge cancels the case because he agreed to it, pays a small fine, and 30 days later, I'm in the same boat. But now I have to do the whole process over again.
And again, I appreciate all that, but I think the question that we have is that what would prevent someone having a primary residence that would not violate their code the same, and you would have to go through that same process.
Correct.
Just because they're living there does not presume that they're gonna keep their property clean and well kept
And I do that
versus
about
having somebody just
3
have
times a
building.
year. I have to bring people in that own homes that are just getting out of hand.
So that happens also for primary residents.
but I think both this board and the town feels like it more likely happens on cases where there is no residence on the property. It's more likely to happen there. So this is why we have this
Yeah,
code.
like on Hitchcock Point Road, there was in 1985, the property owner did an illegal separation, sort of like this, where he sold his lakefront property and he kept a barn that he built back in the 70s on a separate lot. Well, the problem is that when he built the barn, he didn't get a permit for it. But there's a barn there, and it was built in a wetland, we just saw that presentation. So now he's trying to sell the barn, but the DEC puts stipulations on the property. You can't convert it to a house, you can't have any outside storage of any kind. So the guy can't sell the barn because all you can do is use it for car parking. But he wants $85,000 to park a car in there to sell it. So he can't legally, well, he can legally sell it, but nobody can buy it because it's useless to use the barn because you can't use anything on the outside.
Okay, so, again, we appreciate those examples, but the purpose
A lot
of
of
this
examples.
request
If it was
is,
one 35 years ago, that means it doesn't happen too often. It's like
Correct.
35 years ago.
Correct.
Well, yeah, that's.
Well-
It's happened in 35 years. It ain't like something that's consistent.
We hear your concerns, you hear our thoughts. I mean, you're more than welcome to apply for a variance, and, we can see you next week. Mike, if you want to give them that sheet there, that just shows them the steps that we have to go through. I mean, you might be, I know you don't want legal expenses, you might want to talk to a lawyer, and they can, give you a little guidance.
are you saying that with legal advisement that we'd be able to get an approval?
They might tell you that you're wasting your time, or maybe they can find a loophole, or maybe
A
they.
lawyer will never tell you that you're wasting your time paying them for services.
They-
A viable recommendation, so it doesn't sound like that'd be an option, really.
Or they might say there's some loophole in the law they can see, but, I think this board has been very careful on how we make the decisions, because you brought up a good point, like, whereas, these other buildings, but like I said, we have a track record for the last 15 years of denying.
I don't know, it's been a while.
Denying the waiver.
Yeah. All right, sorry we couldn't be more helpful.
But I do want to just clarify one thing. So am I hearing correctly that the only way this would be approved if there is a small home of some sort placed on that lot? Did I hear that correctly?
One of two things. So
Small
the code requires a primary use structure to have a secondary.
Correct, I
So
understand that part.
it would
But
need
that
to be a home.
constitutes a small home as well.
That's what he said. That was the code.
The thing is, he said a small home, can they legally, do they have enough room even to put a small home?
I'm not looking at any of that. I don't know.
Okay, because you might not have enough variances to be allowed to put a small
It would
home
be-
on.
There's plenty of acreage.
Okay, half an acre.
So again, a 500 square feet small home would suffice, if I heard him correctly.
I would double check with him,
Okay.
since he's the one who said it, but a primary use structure allows a garage. It's that simple. And we have, I don't know when the last time was that we did it, I think we ended up regretting it, didn't we, on
Converting
Mm,
part of
black.
it to living space.
Black something road, what was
Black
that?
Creek?
Mike.
It wasn't Black Creek, it
Black
was
Wall.
Smith Ridge, wasn't there a house on Smith Ridge where somebody came in and they wanted a variance to build the garage, and they had a building, we made them get the building permit for the primary structure, we allowed them the variance to build a garage, and they never built the freaking primary structure? That was like 10 years ago, do you remember that? I'm not-
Yes.
I feel like every time I drive by, there's no freaking house, and it makes me mad.
Which one is that?
It's like right by the golf course on the corner of Smith Ridge.
Now, if they also made part of this structure, the existing structure, and if it was a large enough portion of it, they could turn that into living space without having to add on or add another building.
You're saying
But
convert-
obviously, I know you have a lot of stuff in there, you wanna keep all your storage space, but you could possibly, I'm just throwing out ideas, cause I was trying to think, well, geez, if you kept the lot bigger, maybe you could put
No,
a small house, but.
They don't have the road frontage, they need to get a variance for the road frontage.
Well,
We
they
don't-
kept
we
it
don't
on the
care.
I'm not
We
even
have
going
the
there,
road.
but those kinds of things.
To get a house, I think you'll have a whole lot of hurdles to go over.
Yeah, but area variances are a lot more
We got all the other
believable.
thing. We got the road frontage and everything.
No, because what's the road frontage on the back piece?
Yeah.
We have 114 feet on Esther Ave and 132 on Willie. So we meet the requirements of the 75-foot road frontage.
Okay, I didn't
Are all
realize.
those properties yours? Right now, this is one parcel.
Right.
Oh, the whole thing is.
This is one parcel. They're asking for a subdivision to create parcel 1 and parcel 2.
And Willie Road's on the back side there?
Willie Road's
Okay,
here,
I didn't
the lake
realize that
is
was a
here,
road.
Esther
Okay.
runs this way,
Okay,
Esther
so
runs
you got
this
a road
way,
front.
and then there's Willie.
Yeah, so probably you wouldn't probably need any variances, so you wouldn't have to come before this heartless
You're
board.
gonna have your side. Setbacks on the sides.
What constitutes a primary structure? What do you need?
In a residential, it's usually a house. Usually when people are building a garage, the primary is a house. So you can have,
With it running water, toilet.
yeah.
Septic, right.
And so we're,
Everything required for a CFO.
All right,
In a business district, it can obviously be a building for business, so you could have a garage if it was own business, but it's not, it's own residential.
So is there, would that, a letter of some sort come from the board, the codes, your office would be able to provide us kind of those stipulations as to what's required?
To be, for a primary structure?
Yeah, to make this work, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah, I can do that.
a letter saying that the only way this could work is a primary residence, so is that what we're hearing?
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sorry.
All right.
Thanks for your time.
now you're here,
I'm here for Barton and Judas to listen to everything that you guys are doing, to take home to my team and work with John Lang on.
The solar array.
okay.
Concerned citizen.
I will say, since we are still in a meeting and we can speak openly on things, just my thoughts on the solar thing. The legislative body passed an amendment elected by the people of the town that drastically restricts the installment of solar arrays in the town.
Wasn't there something that we voted on?
If we grant a variance of infinity feet, infinity percent, or undefined, I can't remember which way we divide on that. But if we grant a variance of 1,000 feet to literally on top of the wetland, we are completely undoing what the legislature of this town has done. Period. And any solar array company that wants to go anywhere on any wetlands, we will have no leg to stand on to deny it.
I think wetlands are not active cattails, wetlands.
No, I understand.
Anything, but previously farmed and hay lot, that's a perfect place for a solar array because it's not on prime farmland. It's back in where it's off the way, you know.
I'm not disagreeing with you,
but
but what I'm saying
I
is,
do hear what
it
you're
was
saying.
the will of the people who elected those legislators to this town board, who sat in these seats and passed a law putting heavy restrictions on where they can be. And if we grant 0 feet when they just wrote a law putting it at 1,000, we are completely undermining them.
I don't think they understood how significant.
No, I promise you they did. I absolutely promise you they knew how restrictive it is.
They just don't want them in the town. I mean, they're an eyesore.
They're
not
heavily
everybody's
restricting
cup
them.
of tea.
They're heavily
You know.
restricting them. They're not making it impossible. They're heavily
Yeah,
restricting.
they are.
But to go from 1,000 feet to on top of the wetland, you cannot do anything to further erode the legitimacy of a legislative resolution by this board than to pass that.
Yeah, no, I feel, and like you said, just the precedence, I mean.
I
it's
don't
like-
disagree
We
with
can't
you.
deny another one.
I don't disagree with
We
you,
just
but I
opened
look
up-
at it.
We just
As a
opened up the
good
entire
use
north end of the
of-
town to as big and as many solar arrays as they can get National Grid to hook up for them. And I'll tell you where they should put them all, in the I-90 corridor. And then the state can smoke them.
Sure.
State, you bear all the risk. You bear all the issues. You bear all the cost.
That's
You've got a nice wide swath on both sides of I-90 and right down the freaking middle. build guardrails the entire state, and make the whole thing a solar array.
And they're making it wider too.
And blind all the drivers, and all the accidents are your problem.
Well, Town of Lennox sounds like they just open it up so.
Oh, they're going hog wild. But our board is choosing on behalf of the residents to go a different direction than what Lennox is doing.
Yeah, I understand.
And I don't think it's our responsibility to undermine that.
What I hate to see is prime farmland where there's corn on one side of the road and there's these darn things on the other side of the road. And it's taking up our agricultural lands.
I don't disagree with you one iota.
You know,
I
don't
that's why I
disagree.
think that there might be some places for them, but not others. And maybe the town should look at things. I don't know. It's gotta go through the Army Corps of Engineers before it would even get.
It's not inappropriate as a zoning board that's looking at this issue, that's challenged by what's happened, to write them a letter, to have Steve write them a letter on our behalf that articulates, hey, we'd like you guys to reconsider the 1,000-foot setback and to draw that back a little bit and see what they say. But I think what we're gonna find is they did it for a reason and they knew what they were doing.
But I also have to state that when the board made that decision, they did it based on the mapped wetlands as they existed in 2021.
And not based on.
This was where they're placing the solar was not a delineated wetland. It was 1,000 feet from the existing mapped wetland.
Now, so one thing that they could do, they could change the language of the law, and they could say within 1,000 feet of the Army Corps of Engineer mapped wetlands per 2021. That would clear it up. That would open up a lot more development.
That's what she stated.
But they
stayed.
But that's not what they said. So that's what you could, if you want to put something like that in a letter, and let the town revisit it, and let the town hold a public hearing, and let the town deal with the public coming in and saying, hell no, they're gonna be all over the place across the street from my house, don't do it, keep the law the way it is, keep the law the way it is. Then the people have spoken, and we have our marching orders. But as an appointed body, we should not undermine the legislature on this. I don't think it's in the spirit of what the code gives us the authority to do when we grant variances.
We have a couple sets of minutes we need to get approved.
I'll submit a motion to accept the meeting minutes from July 14th.
Do both of them?
And the meeting minutes of August 11th.
Okay. Never heard anything more about Mark here on Tuscarora Road and how you say his name, where he built his sheds there, but
Shed.
Yeah.
Haven't heard a word.
Didn't they go out back and deal with it?
They said they were gonna mutually agree to sell property.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a word.
Do we have a second?
I can only second the minutes.
Or you can only vote, you can only vote on the statement. We got a second, so yes, you can only vote on the August meeting.
He's got them both, I think, he said both.
So let's do July 14th.
Okay, yep.
Okay.
So, Luke, did you second July 14th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All in favor of accepting July 14th minutes as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous?
I abstain, because I wasn't here.
And now do I have a motion to accept the August 11th minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept August 11th.
Okay,
I'll move that.
And Cliff seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Any other information before the board? So do I have a motion to close the meeting?
I'll make a motion to close the meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second it?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.